You've heard about it before. I heard about it from a number of radio callers. The most rigorous and comprehensive analysis of scientific studies conducted on the efficacy of masks for reducing the spread of respiratory illness, including COVID-19, was published last month. Its conclusion: there is just no evidence that masks, make any difference, full stop. But wait, hold on. What about the N95 masks? Makes no difference. None of it, he said. Well, what about the studies that initially persuaded policymakers to impose mask mandates? They were convinced by non-randomized studies, flawed observational studies. How do we get beyond that finding of that particular review?
When you're talking about the effect on the epidemic or the pandemic as a whole, the data are less strong. But when you talk about as an individual basis of someone protecting themselves, there's no doubt that there are many studies that show that there is an advantage.
Masks increase chance to contract, according to a new study.
Mr. Reagan.
I hate wearing medical masks. I have never believed that masks were effective, nor that the politicians mandating them actually believed that they were effective. The mask mandates were a great way to empower Karens all over the country, to lecture everyone, throw their weight around, and even banish people from certain places if they weren't wearing their precious masks. And last year, the CDC finally acknowledged that cloth masks, well, they don't actually work very well. I suspect what they really discovered is that they do nothing.
At this point, and I've been saying this for the last year or so, a cloth mask is little more than a facial decoration.
But they couldn't actually come out and say that, of course. They had mandated cloth masks for the past 2 years.
Cloth coverings, things like this here, and not necessarily a surgical mask or an N95. Cloth coverings work.
There even was a study that showed that the neck gaiters that people wore as face and nose coverings actually aerosolized the exhalation of particles and increased potential transmission.
The gaiter they tested, 0% effective. That's right, 0. Droplets easily pass through the thin material of the gaiter, and researchers say those droplets were split into many more smaller ones.
You can just start seeing the particles growing and growing in the box.
So these cloth masks were no more effective than a security blanket, but they did provide the same comfort factor as the security blanket. And that's really what these leftist politicians wanted. They wanted people to feel safer because of these strict regulations. In February, researchers published a, quote, rigorous and comprehensive analysis of the efficacy of masks. And their results, they said, were unambiguous. They discovered that masks did nothing.
There is just no evidence that masks, make any difference, full stop. But wait, hold on. What about the N95 masks? Makes no difference. None of it, he said.
This even inspired an editorial in the radical left New York Times, basically saying, let's not do the mask thing ever again. But now there is a new research study out that not only supports the masks do nothing conclusion, but actually goes one step further and indicates that masks may increase your chances of contracting. There is a great article about this that's been published in the Epoch Times, and I'm going to read through that with you guys in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. Chances are you've been here before. The chaos in the markets, oil and stocks. Just when you thought it was safe and interest rates were rising, new threats come out of nowhere. Tensions are boiling from Asia to Europe. Adaptation is the key here to safeguarding your wealth. You may not have considered gold before, but listen, it's not speculation. This is insurance. And right now, you need some insurance. Noble Gold Investments have been protecting investors from disaster for years with precious metals. So if you're worried, it might be time to take a fresh look at gold and silver. Gold is a proven safe haven shield for your portfolio and a volatility balance against uncertainty. If it helps, Noble Gold Investments is offering a free 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin with its new IRAs this month. If you open your Noble Gold Investments IRA or 401k rollover, you can claim your coin today. Remember, crisis brews, portfolios waver, gold insulates. Secure yourself against the threats. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com right now, noblegoldinvestments.com, the only gold company I trust. All right, so this article from Epoch Health, Epoch Times. The headline is, higher incidence of COVID-19 found among consistent mask wearers. This article has been written by Naveen Anthropulli. People who wore protective masks were found to be more likely to contract infections than those who didn't, according to a recent Norwegian study. The peer-reviewed study, you know those leftists, they love their peer reviews, analyzed mask use among 3,209 individuals from Norway. Researchers followed them for 17 days and then asked the participants about their use of masks. The team found that there was a higher incidence of testing positive for among people who use the masks more frequently. Among individuals who never or almost never wore masks, 8.6% tested positive. That rose to 15% amongst participants who sometimes use masks and 15.1% among those who almost always or always wore them. Adjusting for factors such as vaccination status, the study determined that the individuals who sometimes or often wore masks had a 33% higher incidence of compared to those who almost never wore masks. This jumped to 40% among people who almost always or always wore masks. However, adjusting for the difference in the baseline risk over time, the risk of wearing masks turned out to be less pronounced, with only a 4% higher increase of infection among mask wearers. So they kind of adjusted for, like, if you're a healthy person, you're probably not going to feel a need to wear a mask. If you're a person who maybe is obese, or you're very old, or you have some kind of autoimmune disorder or something like that where you're afraid of getting COVID, so they adjusted for that and it turned out to be 4% higher. The results contradict earlier randomized and non-randomized studies of the effectiveness of mask wearing on the risk of infection, the researchers wrote. Most of these studies reported that wearing a face mask reduces the risk of infection. Some observational studies have reported many-fold reductions, while one community-based randomized trial failed to demonstrate statistically significant reduction in infection risk, and one cluster randomized community trial found only a modest reduction. The researchers pointed out a major limitation of their study: individuals who use the mask may have done so to protect others from their own infection. This could explain the positive association between risk of infection and mask usage. Behavioral differences and the fact that the survey was based on self-reporting could also contribute to bias, it stated. There is also a possibility that mask wearers felt safe wearing the masks and did not follow other regulations such as social distancing, which raised their risk of contracting COVID-19, the study said. Our findings suggest that wearing a face mask may be associated with an increased risk of infection. However, it's important to note that this association may be due to unobservable and non-adjustable differences between those wearing and not wearing a mask, the researchers stated. Therefore, caution is imperative when interpreting the result from this and other observational studies on the relationship between mask wearing and infection risk. Recommendations to wear face masks in the community are largely informed by low certainty evidence from observational studies. Researchers called for more trials and studies to gain better understanding of the effectiveness of wearing masks against transmission of respiratory pathogens. The study was fully funded by the Norwegian Institute of Public Health. It reported no conflicts of interest. All right, now look, I don't think these researchers were aiming for this result, but it's certainly a bit of a bombshell. And you know what's funny is they seem quite keen on making excuses for the results in their study, and they're like trying to downplay the veracity of their results. You know, that might be because of this, and that might be because of this, and we didn't take this into account either, so, you know, maybe just ignore these results altogether. It's like they know that these results will not be well received in leftist academia or in the leftist media, but this is the result they got, and I, for one, find it pretty fascinating. All right, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Until next time, remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant, it's just they know so much that is not so. Good night.
You know, someone very profoundly once said, if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says, less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.